Welcome. My name is Siege Fairy and I got isekai'd into a Pokemon game. That is what we call the conceit of this video series. Don't worry about it, it'll be fun. Let's get into it. So when I first left our world, I wasn't sure what was happening or where I was. It was a big blank empty void and I figured I was either asleep or dreaming or in that weird state between the two, until a figure started forming. They seemed excited, joyful even. They told me I was the most new and interesting thing to come along in a while, and they weren't gonna let me go that easily. If I could defeat the Pokemon champion, they might let me go. But the first thing I had to understand was that the world of Pokemon and the games that are based on that world are different, and they were gonna implement a few rules to make things more fun and interesting for me. Now I think context is important so that you can understand some of the choices that I had to go through. So let's go into those. Rule number 0, don't tell anyone that you've been isekai'd. If you do, you're going to ruin the story and it's not going to be that interesting. Rule number 1, you may only catch a Pokemon from the first encounter of any area. Rule 1A, if you find a Pokemon that you've already captured, or is in the same evolutionary line as a Pokemon that you've already captured, it doesn't count as an encounter. You can't catch it. Rule 1B, legendaries and mythical Pokemon, those one-of-a-kind ever-in-existence Pokemon, also don't count as encounters. You can't catch them. Rule 2. If a Pokemon loses all of its HP, or, faints in the games, it's dead. You killed it. Rule 2A. If you don't have any Pokemon left in your team, that is, all of them died, you're dead too. Real quick note here. If I happen to die, break any of these rules, I'm not dead. I just get shunted back to the void and have to start all over again. So, death, at least for me, is not permanent. It is for all the Pokemon though. Rule 3. Trainers that I run into are not going to be nice and kind. They're not going to tell me what their next Pokemon is, and they're not going to let me get a free swap in. Rule 4. Battle is chaotic, and I'm not going to have the luxury of just squatting down and spraying aerosols on my Pokemon. The only items that I can use in battle are things that I use against the opponent. So, Pokeballs, Pokedolls, etc. Rule 5. It wouldn't be very interesting or exciting if I train up, so there's going to be a level cap for every gym that I face and a level cap for the Elite Four. I cannot exceed that level cap. If any of my Pokemon do exceed that level cap before the battle, they're not dead, but this figure is going to keep them on lease until after that battle and I have a new level cap. Rule 6. I don't have access to computers or phones or Prima Ultimate Survival Guides or anything. I pretty much got isekai'd just with the clothes on my back. So I can't reference anything. I have to go entirely based on what I can find in the world and what I can remember from playing the games so many years ago. So, not only did I get isekai'd into a Pokemon game, I got isekai'd into a Pokemon nuzlocke. Great. I've played quite a few nuzlockes in my time, significantly easier than this, and I've lost most of them. Hopefully, the pressure is going to make this a little bit easier? I mean, seriously, how long could it take? So I'm shunted out of the void and introduced to Professor Oak. Professor Oak gives me the entire spiel about Pokemon, how some people use them as friends and some people use them as tools, but all people use them regardless. I have the opportunity to give myself and Oak's grandson names. I could do something basic and go with red and blue, traditional, but I think that's boring, so instead I give myself the name Siege. Obviously it is my name, and I think for a little bit as to who I want my rival to be. Eventually I settle on the name Magus, my real life rival. I can only hope that I've brought him into the isekai with me and that I can demolish him every single time that I run into him. And finally, I wake up in Pallet Town, where every young trainer begins their Pokemon journey. I walk around the town for a bit looking for Professor Oak again. He's going to be the source of my starter Pokemon. Town's not that big and he's nowhere to be found, so I throw myself into the tall grass. Professor Oak runs from my house for some reason, takes my hand and brings me into his lab where Magus is waiting. He tells me that his last 3 Pokemon are here and I can take one for free. This is one of the most important choices that I can make, and I'll tell you why. For the first few gyms, there's not going to be a lot of Pokemon encounters, and those encounters are not going to be strong. So whatever Pokemon I choose is going to be a rock, at least for a bit, for my team to center around. Let's talk about those starter Pokemon. For those of you unfamiliar, Pokemon always gives you a choice between fire, grass, and water, and your rival chooses whatever you're weak to. Standard rock, paper, scissors. The fire Pokemon this time around is Charmander, a little fire lizard that eventually evolves into Charizard, a fire-breathing dragon, which is honestly really cool. I'm pretty sure that the first few times that I played this when I was 8 and 9, I always chose Charmander just because, it's a dragon. Who wouldn't? And honestly, Charmander is a good Pokemon. It's fire type, which hits a lot of things super effectively or for neutral damage, and there aren't a lot of fire Pokemon around, at least in the early game. Another thing is that fire moves aren't learned by Pokemon that aren't fire Pokemon, at least in this world. So if I want to use fire moves, I have to have a fire Pokemon. And if somehow there are some Pokemon that do learn fire moves that I don't know about, they're not going to have any stab. Stab being same type attack boost, I think. Basically, it says that if a Pokemon of a certain type uses a move of the same type, it gets a boost in power. Unfortunately, Charmander has the worst start of all the starters. Brock is the Rock Gym leader, the first gym I'm going to go up against, and Fire cannot do anything against Rock. Neither can normal moves, which are the only other kind of moves that Charmander's probably going to have at that point. If I somehow manage to get past Brock, I have Misty. Misty is a water trainer, and water puts out Charmander's tail, so it's going to be fighting uphill to get through those first two gyms. If I manage to get past those first two gyms, I'm kind of set for the rest of the game, but I think it's a little bit too much to risk, at least now. Let's move on to Squirtle. Squirtle is the water Pokemon this time around. It's a little tiny turtle that eventually evolves into a big, giant, chunky boy Blastoise. It's a bigger turtle with water cannons on its back. So the thing about water Pokemon is they're generally good. They have few weaknesses, and while they don't hit as many things as super effectively as fire does, they still do pretty good neutral damage across the board. Unfortunately, water isn't a particularly rare type of Pokemon, and there are a lot of TMs throughout the game that you can just teach other Pokemon, usually normal Pokemon, water moves if you need it for coverage. So if we're talking type-wise, Squirtle doesn't really have a lot going for him. Now, if we're talking about gym matchups, the first gym, Brock, is absolutely demolished by water. The second gym, Misty, water Pokemon, it's kind of an even split. Water resists water, so I'm not going to be doing a lot of damage, but she's not going to be doing a lot of damage to Squirtle either. But if we move on to Lieutenant Surge, an electric gym leader, water Pokemon are going to fall off. Electricity is one of water's few weaknesses. It's not a huge deal because by that time I should have enough of a team that I don't need to rely on my starter anymore, but it is something to consider. Bulbasaur is the grass starter this time around. It's a dinosaur with a bulb on its back, hence the name Bulbasaur. It eventually evolves into Venusaur, which is a bigger dinosaur with a flower on its back, like it budded out into it. Anyway, if you couldn't tell, Bulbasaur in its line is kind of my least favorite of these starters, just aesthetically. One interesting thing to note about Bulbasaur and its evolutionary line is it's the only starter that's dual-typed, grass poison specifically, a unique typing in this generation. This means that twice as many moves, presumably, can have stab and do more damage. That's not actually true because I don't think Bulbasaur learns a single damaging poison move, so poison doesn't really add anything offensively to Bulbasaur. Defensively, poison is also not that good. Like, it adds a few resistances, which I'm sure would be useful, but all of those are overshadowed by its weakness to Psychic. Psychic is scary. One thing that is incredibly useful about poison-type Pokemon, though, are that they are immune to the poison status. Poison can kill your Pokemon inside a battle because it does a little bit of damage every single turn, but it's also the only status that can damage you outside of battle. I've had several Pokemon in several games die on the way to the Pokemon Center because I didn't have any antidotes or full heals. And hopefully I'm not going to run into that situation this time, but it is nice to have just a little bit of safety there. If we're talking about gym matchups, grass Pokemon do just as well against Brock as water Pokemon do, and grass Pokemon destroy Misty, so we don't have this kind of rock versus rock standoff. If we move on to Lieutenant Surge, grass Pokemon also resist electricity, so we have good type matchups on the first 3 gyms. So even though I'm a little bit lukewarm about Bulbasaur aesthetically, it's by far the best choice. Welcome to the team, Brady. Well, I hear you saying, now that you have your starter, you can begin your Pokemon journey, right? No, you'd be wrong. Magus is a jerk and wants to challenge me as soon as I get Brady. We have a fight, and honestly, Magus could totally destroy me, but instead, his Charmander decides to do some victory laps, intimidating and taunting, and I manage to get the kill. Next, I need to figure out what these area things are. Brady, being my first Pokemon, didn't have any conflicts with what I could catch, but now I have to care. I wonder if there's anything that could tell me what areas are.
Because you can actually rule Nuzlocke encounters incredibly consistency, because people always will come and ask me, Jan, is this an encounter? How do I handle this encounter? And there's one really easy way to handle every encounter ruling ever in any nuzlocke ever. If you go into your Pokemon, you go into the stat screen and you look at the received at or caught at screen, right? And you say what route it says or what area it says. It says Route 1, it says fucking Little Root Town, whatever it says, right? That is where you got it. That's where you got that encounter. If that was your first encounter in that area, then it is legitimate. And if not, it's not. You can just never have two Pokemon with the same thing in their stat screen in that. That answers every single encounter question you will ever have about Nuzlocks.
Oh, that was incredibly helpful. Let me just go into the stat screen real quick and look here to see where that met at. Okay. Well, this is going to be a little bit difficult, but we'll get through it. I go past Pallet Town to the aptly named Route 1 and go on to Viridian City. Once at Viridian City, the first city with a Pokemart, I go in and try to buy some Pokeballs, only to be stopped by the clerk. He recognizes me from Pallet Town for some reason and tells me that I have to deliver a parcel to the old professor. Fantastic! I love fetch quests. I take the parcel and traverse back across Route 1 just to have Professor Oak tell me he's incredibly impressed with the bond that we formed over the last 3 minutes. He gives me a Pokedex because I'm definitely going to be catching all the Pokemon in this world, and Mages appears. He rubs it in my face that I don't have a town map and he's going to tell his sister not to. Fortunately, his sister is not a jerk and gives me a town map, which is useful because it tells me where the areas are. At least this is the closest thing that I have to tell me where areas are, so I'm gonna have to rely on it. Now that I have my Pokedex and my town map, I go back across Route 1 and the clerk finally allows me to buy some Pokeballs. I also pick up some antidotes so that I don't run into that poison issue that I just mentioned. After I leave the mart, I figure I'm in the first area. Let's see what Pokemon I can find. I run into an old man who's intent on teaching me how to catch Pokemon. He runs into a Weedle, and he catches it, and then runs away with my encounter. Thank you, old man. I go back to a route that I am intimately familiar with, Route 1, and I find a Pidgey. Pidgey almost kills Brady, but I manage to capture it instead. Welcome to the team, Candy. We go over to the east of Viridian City, and we find a female Nidoran. Now I want to talk about this Nidoran for a bit. I think that the Nidoran lines are pretty cool, but I've never actually used them in a Pokemon game. If I had to guess why, it's probably because they evolve via Moonstone. And the thing about Moonstone evolutions and other stone evolutions is that they're really hard to time. If you evolve the Pokemon too early, they become really powerful really quickly, but they don't really learn that many good moves as they level up anymore. If you evolve them too late, they could be a drag on your team and in a Nuzlocke die. But I'm really excited to be able to do that. The other interesting thing to note is that in this world, Nidorans are the only Pokemon with a definite sex. So the weight of responsibility is on me to give this Pokemon a name respectful to all of womankind. So I go with the name Gaga. I apologize. I'm disappointed in myself for two very good reasons. The first is, this is obviously a reference to Lady Gaga. I figured voice of a generation, obviously very representative, very respectful toward womankind, and I could have made that explicit by just naming Gaga Lady Gaga. There's enough room. The other reason is there was something staring me in the face, and it only took me about 30 seconds to realize that I dropped the ball. See, Nidoran are poison Pokemon. There is another female pop singer who has a song that is quintessential poison. I cannot reiterate how much I am disappointed in myself. After I take a few moments to collect myself, I move north of Viridian City to Route 2, which I will henceforth refer to as Baker Street. I find a Rattata, which I name Basil. I continue forward into Viridian Forest, where there are numerous bug catchers around, and I find a Caterpie, which I name Trish. We train up a little bit on wild Pokemon, but there are a lot of trainers in the area. I don't think they're too dangerous, so we can finally get our teeth wet. That is a phrase, right? There's nothing of note that happened within the forest. Not at all. Especially not with my first battle. No rules were broken. One thing I do want to say is that I'm very thankful that I did have the foresight to pick up some antidotes, otherwise Basil of Baker Street would not have been with the team for very long. Trish evolves into Metapod, so I figure it's time to see my goal and head over to the Pokemon League. Definitely not any battles along the way or anything, except that Magus is just sitting there waiting. I don't know why, but a battle we begin. There's nothing of interest to talk about in this fight. Magus either threw or is just incompetent, and I got a little bit of XP and a little bit of money. I can't get very far into the Pokemon League though because there are guards preventing me from moving forward unless I have the correct badges. So I'm sure I'll be coming back here every now and again just to make sure that they hold their promise of letting me through. Having nowhere else to go but north, I head past Viridian Forest and I find a patch of tall grass right before Pewter City. I'm hopeful to be able to fill out my team before I go to the first gym, only to realize that, no, this is part of Baker Street. I don't know why they decided to put a Viridian Forest in between South and North Baker Street, but they did. This isn't a new area. I can't catch a new Pokemon. I check out the town a bit, but I want to move on to the next area of tall grass, which apparently is in Route 3, and unfortunately, someone's blocking the way and tells me that I have to beat Brock before I can move forward. So this is my team, this is what I have to fight Brock with. The only thing of note is that Trish evolves into Butterfree and learns Confusion, and Brady learns Vine Whip. I wonder which of those moves are going to be more important against Brock. I wander around the town a bit to get as much information about Brock as possible. There's not a lot. Two things that I did find interesting though is that Route 3 eventually leads to Mount Moon, which has Team Rocket in it. Team Rocket is a band of Pokemon thieves, and I mean, they're the standard bad guys. I'm gonna have to run into them because I don't imagine they're just gonna let me go, but I don't think they're much of a threat. The only other person that I find interesting is a bug catcher. This bug catcher tells me that Brock specifically set up his gym here in Pewter City because it's on the other side of Viridian Forest. You see, Viridian Forest is teeming with bug Pokemon, and a lot of beginner trainers start from Pallet Town. They come through, they have a lot of bug Pokemon. Brock chose to specialize in rock Pokemon, not because it suits his name or anything, but because rock Pokemon absolutely demolish bug Pokemon. Brock has dedicated his entire gym leader career demolishing starter trainers who have to rely on these bug Pokemon from Viridian Forest because he's weak. He wants to feel powerful. This is the way that he has decided to do so. I'm a little bit angry and upset, but that's nothing compared to Trish. Trish grew up in Viridian Forest. A lot of her friends are still there, and a lot of her friends have joined other trainers, only to reach Brock. She's not going to let him get away with this. So we heal up at the Pokemon Center and move on into Brock's gym to fight his only disciple, who doesn't even have any rock Pokemon. Pretty sure he's a reject trainer from the Viridian City gym, which specializes in ground types. And now, the battle begins. Brock sends out his Geodude and I send out Brady. Figure it's good to get a strong start in there. Brady throws out a Leech Seed to be able to start sapping health and get some healing on our side, and Growl to make sure that the Geodude can't hit very hard. And then, Brady does something that most people would probably think is unthinkable. Gives the floor to Trish. Trish is not just a bug Pokemon, but a bug flying Pokemon. She's 4 times weak to rock, but she doesn't care. She's going to show Brock that bug Pokemon are powerful. A few confusions later, Geodude is down. Onix comes out, so we swap back to Brady and rinse and repeat. Onix responds to the swap with a Screech, which sharply lowers Brady's defenses. Brady already had a Leech Seed coming out, but I don't feel very safe just keeping them in there, so I swap over to Gaga. Gaga, being my tankiest Pokemon, takes whatever Onix can dish out and continues to growl to weaken their attack. And now we have something interesting that we didn't have to worry about with Geodude. Onix uses Bide. Bide is a move in which you just take damage, and then, after the move is over, you return that damage twofold to whichever Pokemon is out. While this might be threatening to some people, especially little 8-year-old me, I don't have to worry about this. This just gives me free setup moves. Gaga can give this stage to Trish without any worries. Trish continues to Confusion until Onix, just like Geodude, is gone. Brock, you specifically set up your gym here so that you could rock bug Pokemon, but bug Pokemon have rocked you. And now that we have successfully belittled Brock, it's time for my favorite segment of any given video, the simping shoutout. The simping shoutout is a place where I shout out someone that I simp, pretty self-explanatory. A quick note though, no one featured in the simping shoutout knows I exist, I just kinda like them. Today's simping shoutout is brought to you by Pokemon Challenges. Pokemon Challenges is a Twitch streamer and YouTube video person by the name of Jan. He does a lot of Pokemon challenges, once again, right there in the name, specifically nuzlocks. He does a lot of educational type content, so anyone who wants to get into nuzlocking can kind of have a running start, and I find a lot of his content super entertaining. I only found Jan a few months ago, but I think I've already watched most of his content, at least here on YouTube. He is definitely an inspiration for me to get back into nuzlocking after several years of not thinking about Pokemon at all, and specifically for creating this series. While I do like a lot of what he puts out, one thing that I do want to call out is that he's incredibly anti-gatekeepery and actively discourages anyone that he knows of being gatekeepery. While he is an incredibly hardcore Pokemon gamer and he finds a lot of enjoyment of finding and creating these insurmountable challenges and finding a way to surmount them, he doesn't force that or even encourage that for other people. Pokemon is a fun game, and if you're having fun with it, you're playing it the right way. Jan, if you ever come across this, thanks a lot for being you. I hope I wasn't too cringe. Everyone else, thanks a lot for watching, getting up to this point, or skipping to this point, or whatever else. I hope you have a good day, good life, all that jazz, and we'll see what happens next time. Bye!